335. It is the Pilot's Bill of Rights. This is very significant that we get this done today, and I'm going to explain why. First of all, when Senator John Glenn from Ohio retired, that left me as the last active commercial pilot in the United States Senate. And consequently, I probably get more complaints than anybody else does, and about problems, abuses with the FAA. And I have to say this, that I was very complimentary yesterday on so many of the people. The vast majority of the inspectors, the controllers, and others at the FAA are so talented. In fact, the first thing I do when I go up to Oshkosh each year, the largest fly-in in the world, is I go up to where they're all gathered together. And I compliment them on the fact that they are taking on the toughest job for a 6-day period in Oshkosh as a volunteer. And so I laud their virtues. However, you got to keep in mind that any bureaucracy can become abusive. So I have introduced the Pilot's Bill of Rights. And the reason I'm speaking right now is we have 25 co-sponsors right now. That's 25% of the United States Senate is on as co-sponsors. And the way that rules work around here, any of the members who might be listening right now, and I know the occupier of the chair is very concerned about this, he's very active with me in this particular legislation, that any staffers who are watching, they should advise their member that they have until close of business today, probably one more hour, to put their names down. They too will be listed as original co-sponsors. Now, the bill simply does 4 things. First of all, it requires the FAA for any enforcement action to make sure that the pilot out there is fully aware of what he's being accused of, and before any ultimatums are put forth. Consequently, that pilot is able to defend himself. Second thing it does, it clarifies what they call statutory deference. Right now, the statutory deference relates to the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB. It's the only area of appeal, so that if a pilot is accused of something and he looks at it and thinks it's unfair, he would have to go to the NTSB, and yet because of deferences, they merely rubber stamp in almost all cases what the FAA does. As an example of the emergency determinations that were made last year, only one was actually granted, and the rest of them were denied. This bill will allow, in terms of fairness, that if something is going on and they refuse to consider a case, an appellate process where the pilot can go to the federal district court and be heard there. The third thing it does has to do with NOTAMs. That's notice to airmen. That's a very significant thing. Those of us who are pilots know that when we go into a field and we check and see what the NOTAMs are, and that is if there's any work on the runway, if there's any problem there, if there's any taxiways that are closed, they will give you that information. However, the problem is it's a pilot's responsibility to do this, and the FAA many times doesn't even post these NOTAMs. So what we're saying in our FARs or our laws, we're saying to a pilot, you've got to be responsible to know what is going on at the airport where you're going to be landing, and yet there's no place you can find it. So this requires that they revamp this system so that there is a central location. We specify that in the legislation so that that can be found. And then the fourth and finally is another problem that is there in terms of medical certification. Those of us who are pilots have to have medicals, and we have to have a certification process. But this has been a problem for a long period of time. I've had countless people call me and talk about the problems that they're having with their medical certification. In fact, all the requests for assistance to the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, now they represent hundreds of thousands of pilots, of all the requests for assistance that they receive each year, 28% are related to the FAA's medical certification process. And so I would say of this very simple legislation, 2 of them actually changed the statutes so that it offers protection to pilots, but the other 2 are working together to come up with a system where we can have a central location for NOTAMs, as well as having a fair process on for medical evaluations. Now, I think it's very obvious that there's a lot of bureaucracies where one or two people can be bad. When I was mayor of Tulsa, I can remember all it took is one or two bad cops, and that gave a black eye to everybody else. And I remember actually when I was running, it's a whole reason that I ran for office in the first place. I can remember when I was out in the private sector, I was doing things that I thought we were supposed to be doing, and I had one old thing called the Wrightsman Oil Estate, and I was going to take this old eyesore and make it into a building and preserve it as it was originally. Now, old in my city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, was in this case was maybe 1910 or 1912. We weren't even a state until 1907. So this is something everybody wanted. I went to the city and went to the city engineer, and I said, I want to take this eyesore of a fire escape on the second floor and move it from the south to the north end. Same thing, service the same number of people, but it's an eyesore, and this gets it out of the way. Everybody's for it. No one's against it. He said, well, you can't do that until this committee meets, and the commission, let's see, you have to have notice. That'd be 3 more weeks before you can get notice. A month after that, you can get on the agenda. I said, look, everyone's for it. He said, that's your problem, not mine. I said, oh, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to run for mayor, and I'm going to fire you. And I ran for mayor, and I fired him. So this can happen in any bureaucracy. And this is what we're looking at now. So the reason that there's a sense of urgency that we have already told all of the groups, the Experimental Aircraft Association, AOPA, all these the groups that represent these different organizations, that we're going to be having this bill ready with all of our original co-sponsors and then co-sponsors, so that when we arrive, and when I arrive at the end of July at Oshkosh, Wisconsin, I'm going to do the same thing I did in 1994 that caused us to be able to pass the first product liability bill on aviation and aviation products that had the effect of changing us from a major importer of aviation products and of airplanes to a major exporter, just by changing that. It was an 18-year repose bill. I did that at Oshkosh with an audience of 200,000 people. These are single issue people, and I can assure you that they're going to be just as interested in this bill. So I will be presenting this, and I'm going to encourage as many people up there, members of the Senate, who want to get their name in today. They can be co-sponsors, original co-sponsors, like the occupier of the chair at the present time, and myself, and 23 other members of the United States Senate. With that, Mr. President, one last reminder, this is S1335. This is the last chance. You have 1 more hour to be an original co-sponsor. I hope you'll join me in doing that. Thank you very much. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that the time